are good to go. Chair, whenever you are.
Thank you. Gavel. Welcome, everyone. I call the October 24th, 2023 Landmark Preservation Board meeting to order. The main purpose of tonight's meeting is the cultural resources element of the 2024 Imagine Bothell Comprehensive Plan. Before we move on to agenda items, I'd like to acknowledge our hybrid meeting format. The City of Bothell is providing the option to attend this meeting either in person or remotely via Microsoft Teams. For those participating via Teams, the chat and question functions are not available for use to ensure compliance with the Public Meetings Act. We have a public comment agenda item at the beginning of this meeting. The time is for comments on issues not on tonight's agenda. Please limit these comments to 3 minutes. We will be using our voice to signal available time. When we indicate, commenters will have 20 seconds to conclude. When the 3 minutes is over, your comments will be concluded. Please note that the City of Bothell does not tolerate verbal harassment. Public comment and hearing testimony will be allowed, both in person and via Teams. Those wishing to comment via Teams were asked to submit an online form by 3 p.m. today. People wishing to submit written comments were asked to submit those comments by 3 p.m. Email was encouraged as well and will be acknowledged. Those in attendance may also make comments and have been asked to indicate their desire to comment on the sign-in sheets. The city website and tonight's agenda provided information to the public for providing comments. A call number was also provided on the meeting agenda for members of the public who wish to call in by phone to listen live to the meeting. For our phone-in callers during staff presentation, staff will make every effort to specify which materials they are referencing to so everyone can follow along. At this point, we will take a moment to acknowledge the attendance of the board members. Member Thomas. Here. Member Babashinov, and I'm sorry if I butchered your name, I'm sorry. Member Babashinov.
He was here.
That's okay. Member Nelson, I am here. Member Julie. Not here, right? Mm-hmm. Member Salazar.
Here.
Excellent. And Member Soppy.
Here.
Excellent. In addition, Senior Planner Kristen Mant, is that how you say it? I'm sorry.
Kirsten Mant. Yeah.
Mant, exactly. Great. And community engagements specialist Sarah Frost from city staff is present, as well as Director Greenspan from city staff, as well as their consultant Adam Alsobrook from Willamette Cultural Resources Association. Lastly, before we begin, I'd like to reiterate some meeting guidelines. For all meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before speaking. Mute your microphone when not speaking. Before we begin, I would like to remind commenters that while you may speak to whatever topic you choose, we ask that if you are a council candidate, you do not use this time to speak to your own campaign. Each person is solely responsible for their own comments, but speaking about your own campaign can be a violation of campaign laws, which the Public Disclosure Commission would determine. For us board members, at the specific breaks in the presentation, I will be calling on members who wish to speak or ask a question. If you want to speak, please indicate this by raising your hand. I will call you as I see them. This will help avoid the problem of 2 people speaking at the same time. Please identify yourself before you ask a question, make a motion or second a motion, or participate in debate. And of course, please mute your microphone when not speaking. The first item on the agenda is public comment. The city has accepted visitor comment in writing as well as accepted sign-up sheets for those who wish to speak at tonight's meeting. Written comments submitted to staff no later than 3 p.m. today were forwarded to all board members and are part of the record. This time is for items not on tonight's agenda. Now, did you get any comments?
No comments were received.
That is okay. So now I believe we go to new business.
Yes.
Excellent. New business 2024 Imagine Bothell Comprehensive Plan, Cultural Resources Element.
Cool.
All right. So tonight, as was mentioned by the chair, we're going to be talking about the comprehensive plan kind of generally, and then talking more specifically about what is now called the historic preservation element, but that we are going to be calling the cultural resources element. And our consultant, Adam, will spend some time talking about some best practices and some things that he's thinking about for changes to the element, and then as well changes to the regulations in Title 22 and maybe some process stuff as well. So this is just a quick timeline slide. This will be the first time you folks have seen it. This is just the slide I've been bringing to Planning Commission and Council as we've been moving through this process, just to give a sense of where we've been and where we're going. I will be needing to update this very soon, but right now we're looking at our existing conditions review. These are the existing conditions that will go into the analysis work done through the environmental review called the DEIS, or Environmental Impact Statement. We're working on revisions to goals and policies throughout the plan. Like I mentioned, some of that preliminary work for the draft environmental impact statement. Our timeline for that will be, we're looking to have the draft environmental impact statement be published at the end of February is the current timeline. And that will also be concurrent with the drafts of the actual elements themselves for review. And then we have ongoing engagement happening as well. Upcoming engagement opportunities. Our big push is this Thursday is the comprehensive plan. Love for you folks to come if you can. It's going to be up at Skyview Middle School from 5 to 8:30 in their commons. We will have all sorts of fun activities. We'll have some nice swag. There'll be a edible cookie dough and ice cream truck. We'll also have childcare and activities for kids as well. So for anyone who wants to come and you don't have childcare at home, feel free to bring the kids. I will also be doing some tabling next Tuesday at Trick or Treat on Main Street. That's basically just going to be me there with materials, answering questions, pretty general. And then we'll also be attending the upcoming Civic Saturdays sessions at KCLS, which is the library downtown. We will be there mostly for the last sort of hour of the session and then staying afterwards for just discussion and to field questions. Would recommend going for the whole session. They're pretty great. The one in November is going to be on civic spaces. And in January on the 20th, it'll be civic infrastructure. And then looking much further out into the future, we'll be doing our second open house in March. Again, this is going to be coinciding with the comment period for the EIS, the DEIS, and that will be much more specific to the draft elements as well. This open house on Thursday is going to be a lot more kind of high-level gathering priorities, talking about the different elements of a comprehensive plan, providing some information about what it is and why it's important. So more to come on that. And then upcoming meeting dates for Planning Commission and City Council. Our next session with Planning Commission will be next Wednesday. We'll be talking about sub areas in general, but more specifically, the sub area currently known as the Country Village, Lake Pleasant, Bothell Ever Highway sub area. Doing re-envisioning for that, both acknowledging the changes that have happened to that sub area, as well as its nomination as a countywide growth center and the targets that we need to meet to qualify. Then we'll be talking also about the cultural resources element, which is why we're coming to talk to you all tonight first and bringing that information to Planning Commission, and then urban design. And then our next city council meeting will be on November 14th, talking about the new climate element, the natural environment element, shorelines, and parks. And this information is also all on the comprehensive plan website as well to reference. All right, so as I mentioned, quick overview, we'll be doing a little bit of a kind of a comp plan 101. Some of the priorities for the 2024 update, and then some recommended priorities and best practices that Adam will be talking about. So comprehensive planning, what is it? So this is our comprehensive plan, Imagine Bothell. 2015 is the most recent one. We've had some pictures of some of the prior updates and amendments as well. And what is a comprehensive plan? So I really enjoy this quote from Municipal Resource and Service Center. I think if you haven't gone to their website, it's a really awesome reference for planning in general. And basically, it's the sort of policy guidance for kind of everything that we do in the city, both on the staff side, as well as elected officials and boards and commissions. The three kind of buckets of things that it impacts when it comes to actual projects are the municipal code, so that's the actual development regulations, the budget, so how much we plan for and how we prioritize projects, and then the design and construction standards adopted by Public Works. The underpinning of all of this is the Growth Management Act, which was adopted in 1990. The primary component that is really important for the Growth Management Act is the establishment of the urban growth boundary, which basically says we want to build mostly within this and not really outside of it. We want to protect forest lands, we want to protect agricultural areas, rural areas, And it also is the act that mandates comprehensive planning for jurisdictions that are required to plan. This is just a long list of all the goals in the Growth Management Act. They generally kind of align with elements. Some are required, some are not. Some say that they're required, but there's no funding to require them, so they're not technically required. We pretty much do all of them, except for the ones that aren't really applicable to us, like natural resource industries. I don't know that we actually have any natural resources on a larger scale that are applied to us, and we don't have a port. The new one this year is the climate change and resiliency goal, and that is what has mandated the climate element that we're working on. And then in terms of the planning framework that we work within, so after the state level, it gets down to regional. For us, it's Puget Sound Regional Council. There's 4 counties that plan within the Puget Sound Regional Council. We are in 2 of those, of course. And they also create our regional growth plan, which is Vision 2050. And within that be multi-county planning policies, which is a bit of a tongue twister, so I like to shorten it to MPPs. And then each county also comes up with their own visioning document with CPPs. They're countywide planning policies that have to be consistent with the multi-county planning policies. And then our comprehensive plan has to be consistent with the CPPs and the MPPs and any other sort of general state level requirements. And then that needs to be consistent with our development regulations. And that all kind of ends up with where this all goes, which is projects. So some of the areas of focus this time around are, of course, we need to meet our requirements. And that includes accommodating our growth allocations, both for housing units, housing affordability need within those housing units, and our growth targets for jobs. Another thing we also wanted to make sure was there was a very robust and inclusive engagement process and envisioning process with the community. The transportation team is working on adopting a new transportation level of service, the goal of which is to have a more kind of multimodal look at level of service. So we're not just emphasizing single occupancy vehicles, but we're also looking at all the ways that people get around, whether that be bikes, walking, looking at freight, and transit. And then in general, incorporating DEI throughout the plan, as well as the planning process for the plan. So that has been a big part of review for all of the elements. We also just want to make it more user-friendly. It's pretty black and white, as you can tell right now. So making it something that's a little bit more accessible to the public, and something that people really want to pick up and read and be a little more easily digestible. And then, as I mentioned, we're adding our climate element. And then we also want to pull out the action components of the elements and put that into an implementation element or implementation plan. The goal of that being we can be really intentional about the projects that we're prioritizing, tying them to funding, tying them to certain success metrics and timelines, which will also help us with reporting back to the state, which we'll have to do at the 5-year mark in 2029. And with that, I think we'll maybe pause for questions if you want to have any questions about sort of comprehensive planning in general or anything like that. Otherwise, we can kind of move on to the element if there's no questions. Sure.
So this presentation is on the website.
I don't think it is unless we put something on the Comp Plan 101 page.
Not with those graphics.
But we could.
We
I
could.
just think it might be a good idea for, because people, including me, didn't know really any of this. I'm learning it now, and thank you for explaining it to me.
Yeah.
But I do think that a lot of people will kind of understand what goes more into the comprehensive plan if we have something like this up there, if they're interested, and they'll kind of know what's going on. Just a suggestion. I think great presentation, by the way.
Good idea, because this is rather succinct.
Mhm.
And the only other thing we had out there published was from the 2015 and then the
Mhm.
earlier one.
Right.
And those are basically completed.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We do also have a Comp Plan 101 FAQ type thing up on both the city website and Engage Bothell right now too, which is a really useful tool as well. But it would be great to flush it out with some graphics, I think.
Yeah.
It's helpful when we have to present at, different commissions. It resets us to bring us back to more of a base level
Sure.
so that everybody has a common understanding. I think we can probably even do a narrated PowerPoint, almost as a recorded Zoom webinar, and have like a 5 or 10 minute thing that we post on the website so people could watch this.
Yeah, and I think that's
I
great.
think that'd be really helpful for people because there are people that remember what we did before, but that wasn't really published on the website.
Mhm.
You know, and then it kind of knocked around City Hall and so on for a while. And then it just sort of disappeared. But then it was, I mean, people saw it. The buildings were built, things changed
Mhm.
and didn't change. And I think it's really good now to use the website, especially because you've got some good, relatively coherent graphics that, you know, you don't have to know a lot to understand what it's saying.
Yeah, and I've had to do this presentation enough times now that I feel like I've kind of refined it down to something nicely succinct and simple, but still explains what it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
I think you do a good job. I think it was a
No,
good
that's,
presentation.
and that's really good because a number of people, they don't understand that, you know, it's mandated up here. It isn't something that you guys are inventing.
Mhm.
That's really important.
Right.
It isn't just, you know, we're not pushing this on people. Everybody's a part of it. It comes from a lot of different places and then comes close.
Right, exactly.
And that's a good thing to get out there.
Well, thank you for that.
I also want to give kudos that we're kind of marketing that we're doing this, the comprehensive plan, which are like the Thursday Skyview. I plan to be there for at least a little bit. I want to see what's going on. Because people need to know. I don't think people, if I were to knock on, well, I don't know if it, 2,000 doors, I don't know how many Bothelites would know we even have a comprehensive plan. And maybe that's because, a lot of people are starting engaged. But it's getting better, to be fair. I feel like it's getting better. But anyways, so that's kudos to you guys for marketing it. So.
If you work in on city boards or different things, you understand that the comp plan is this ongoing, long-term process. And then it's renewed periodically. I don't think a lot of people really understand that, and it's not really understood that the process is involving the state, the county,
Yeah.
and then within the county,
Mhm.
different elements. And then because we're in two counties, we,
You have to do everything
there's good
right.
reasons to be in two counties. Don't get me wrong. I love it. But, there's things that have to be dealt with and people don't necessarily pay attention to that. And it does make us unique, but at the same time, it gives us, strengths, weaknesses and so
It's a
on.
fun challenge.
But people really do, they see a lot of things happening, a lot of change, and a lot of longtime Bothelites get really tense. What can I say?
Yeah,
Sure.
great. Thank you for that.
Are there any other comments or questions?
I just want to ask one thing. We didn't approve the minutes from
I know,
last time.
I remember that. We'll just do it after.
Okay.
That was my fault
That's
because you
okay.
asked and I was like, yeah, go for it. And then I remembered we had
I know, I'm
That's
sitting here with my little check
My
off list.
bad.
That's okay.
That's okay.
We'll just do it after. Out of order,
Okay.
but it'll get done.
That's fine.
Before I fully pass things over to Adam, I just want to highlight, we did have some engagement this summer related to historic landmarks at some of the summer nights events. And we had an intern from UW, Shirley, who was fantastic, who did all these little infographics for us. So we had a big map that was just asking folks, what cultural and historic landmarks are important to you? Put it on a map. And then we kind of categorized them to see, generally, what is it that people were really thinking about? And interestingly, historical structures, while they were, considered important, of course, some of the things people thought about the most were like local businesses they really love, or like parks they really love. So that was just a fun exercise and wanted to show you guys that we, talked about that and got some really good feedback.
We've seen that before over the years. People will park at Bothell Landing because they've got the buildings right there.
Yeah.
So they see those. If we keep up the little street signs, the ones that are on the corners, they see those. So there's that multi-level, Bill Wise-Nuggles rocks really helped. Because people just need to see things out there that they can relate to. And if it's not there, they don't relate to it because the historic properties we have other than these are in the neighborhoods.
Mhm.
So if they live by one, or they walk by when they see it. And that's kind of hard to do. I mean, maybe we do need to think about like the park. Oh shoot, I just forgot the name of it. The park down in Canyon Park.
William Penn?
Oh, the one over at Crystal Springs.
Oh, yeah.
That used to be a mink farm.
Hmm.
And, you know, it just dawned on me that, you know what, I don't think we have any historic markers down there that flag that was a mink farm, and we had a lot of mink farms, and the other one was a mink farm, the Winningham Farms. And, you know, mink, unless that's out there, people aren't relating to it even within our parks, and that's a good place to get them to relate to. You know, we don't have on the forest park over here, that was Boy Scout property at one time. And these things are not marked. That's something we need to think about. If people are gonna recognize park,
That was owned by a private party and they donated it to the Boy Scouts for lifetime use.
yeah, and then
And
it
they
was sold.
sold it, so they
Yeah.
had the money for the lifetime use, and the development fell through, and
Yeah.
the city was able to come.
Was that, we're talking about Wayne Golf Course?
No.
No.
the
No,
North
that's a
Creek
whole nother
Forest.
one that we haven't tagged.
Oh, the North Creek Forest. Okay, got it, got it.
And that, you know, that relationship, it's good to keep track of it, sign it, and say, hey, you know, this is how we got it.
Well, and then
Daylighting the creek down here
Most of
took
the-
years.
most of the forest around here, there's no old growth.
No,
So the
the
the other
last,
thing to be noted in some of these park areas is the forests are secondary
third.
growth. They were logged off.
when they were logged off.
Yeah, when and under, who was involved with the logging and that. A lot early on with the logging, a lot of natives were involved with
Yeah.
logging.
The last area to be logged was the North Creek Valley, and that was around 1910, and they went up the hill there, up toward Nike Hill.
I don't know if this is the appropriate point.
It's just,
I think people are, you bring this up, but I was looking at the current historic preservation. I think we kind of moved through the letter or whatever, looking at the comprehensive plan, and looking at Imagine Bothell. And now we're kind of looking at the current historic preservation. I think one of the big things that's missing from this are the dominant and non-dominant, or sometimes it is alternative narratives of areas. And I think there's a real tendency to be very myopic in terms of what we look at as cultural landmarks or historic landmarks, and not look from a more longer term historical perspective and look at how what's currently the dominant narrative has actually changed over time. And what were some of the transitions in that from a previously dominant narrative to a new dominant narrative.
And I think we're gonna get into that a little bit with Adam's part of the discussion. And it is also part of the reason why we are proposing to change it to cultural resources as opposed to historic preservation, to kind of speak to that breadth of what it means to be a cultural historic landmark. I think the next few slides are gonna be
Sorry, one more question. Apologies. So we got that data from the summer nights, right?
Yes.
Out of curiosity, and we might not know this, but how many people were polled?
I think we had anywhere between like 30 and 50 conversations at each event.
Okay.
So
We had a fair amount of events too.
good
so.
handful.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people actually responded to this, specific
Yeah.
questions versus just talk to us, but we had some really good outreach and engagement at those. I felt like we talked to a lot of folks. So I don't have an exact number for you at all.
That's, no, that's okay, but
I
just a general
really
outline. Yeah.
agree with Ray. There's, because it doesn't talk about the transitions up there. And I mean, we have our Native American culture that was here. Then we had very almost light on the landscape for a while because it was just a through area. And then we had logging, small farms. But for a number of years, we had farms here, the egg industry, the fur industry, that are almost completely forgotten. And the eggs from a couple of the farms here in Bothell were sent up to Alaska during the gold rush. And then for the next 40 years. And that was, you know, part of the feed mill over here that was taken down was involved in that. It's in the small communities, we've lost a lot of that verbal and just the knowledge.
Well, I'm kind of amazed at the thing out at the river is probably the most important cultural historic
Entity.
resource that goes back through different cultures.
Yeah, it's the common thread, literally, and the North Creek Valley and the
And it's been
Salmon.
shaped and changed, and the tributaries into it have been shaped and changed by human activity.
Done. I like that note.
There's in regards to that, the restoration that's been going on, and it's, I always think of it as sort of under observation of the 2 salmon runs out in the North Creek. Because unless you know about it, you take a kid out to see it, or you go out and see it yourself. At the point when basically white settlers came here, or any settlers, those creeks, you could walk across with the salmon, but it wasn't just salmon. There was other fish in them, similar to cutthroat and other runs that we have no concept to relate to. And the fact that we are getting some restoration is really, really important. So again, you know, I like having the cultural up there, but it's almost like cultural, natural resources. You're gonna broaden our scope. We're gonna broaden.
Well, I think that's a good time for me to transition over to Adam to kind of take the wheel from here to
Yeah.
talk about staff recommendations.
Sure.
For moving forward for both the element and then also some of the regulatory components. So Adam, I will hand things over to you. Let me know when you want me to change the slide.
I mean, I was very much enjoying just the organic conversation that was going on, you know, because I mean, really, that's just kind of leapfrogs ahead to some of the questions that, you know, definitely, you know, staff and consultant will be, you know, asking of the Landmark Preservation Board members is, you know, to really, you know, we need to have a way to capture this feedback because we want to incorporate it as much as we can into the most current version of the cultural resources element of the comp plan. So to that end, sorry, go ahead. Someone spoke up.
I just said, good. That was me.
Okay. And so, you know, one of the things, you know, that I wanted to talk about this evening is to, you know, talk about some cultural resources planning best practices. And so before I get into that, one of the reasons, you know, some of you might, you know, wonder, you know, what's the difference between historic preservation and cultural resources? And so the way that I generally explain it is you know, I tell people about, you know, what I do. What I do professionally in my day-to-day job is I am a cultural resource management professional. I actually do not necessarily identify as a historic preservationist, because historic preservationists are usually, you know, specifically focused on an individual landmark or group of landmarks or perhaps a historic district that they're really kind of laser focused on. And that's not to discount those efforts at all, right? But cultural resource management is really, it's all encompassing. You know, it's intended to really open up the discussion about the identification and documentation and potential designation of things that are not necessarily built environment. And so, you know, already, the discussion has come up about parks, you know, landmarks, you know, other than the buildings that are, you know, gathered at the museum. You know, the public is talking about, in addition to parks, they're talking about local businesses, they're talking about cultural institutions. And then it's like, you know, I thought it was very interesting that, you know, even amongst that, you know, group of people that staff spoke to, historic structures were actually a very, very small component of it. And I thought that was very interesting. And so in general, you know, as we're shifting to talking about the cultural resources element of the comp plan, one of the things that we're going to do, you know, the most overarching activity that just kind of sets the tone for all of this is to continue to identify, survey, document, and whenever possible, nominate and designate cultural resources that are significant due to their associations with Bothell's historically underrepresented communities. And so this was one of the parts of you know, the telling Bothell's full story. And so this is really about putting that you know, into the comp plan as a best practice. The other thing that I would like to speak about as well is and this goes hand in glove with also that first point, and also some of the comments that board members Thomas and Sampi had mentioned. So there's a hidden history to a lot of this. You know, sometimes it is literally physically hidden, and sometimes it's hidden in, you know, just in the kind of the historical record. And so, you know, one of the things that I thought was very interesting, it's a very good point that board member Thomas had mentioned, is that it's you know, it's second growth forest. Not many people realize that what they're looking at, you know, the very dense, wonderful foliage that people, you know, love, you know, to live among. You know, actually, that's, you look at the historic photos of Bothell, you know, from the 19-teens and the 1920s, and it's a completely different environment that, you know, I would imagine that some people probably think would be, you know, rather unattractive, right? You know, if that's how the place looked today, I think people might kind of give second thoughts about wanting to live there. But, you know, it's all subjective. But hidden history, you know, one of the points to this is that some potential cultural resources in Bothell may literally be hidden from public view by dense foliage or tall fences. However, that does not make that resource any less significant. If a landmark preservation board member happens to know of a cultural resource that has not already yet been identified, surveyed, and documented, I would encourage that board member to notify staff of the cultural resource so that it may be investigated further. And so, you know, part of it is, you know, asking the local authorities, you know, not authorities in the sense of the police or the fire department, no, not those kind of authorities, but, you know, you as board members, members of the Bothell Landmark Preservation Board are you know, people look to you as, you know, being the local authorities, and many of you are extremely knowledgeable due to your long tenure on the board and your long history of living in the community. And so, those first 2 points are really just, to kind of set the tone of what we're really doing here. The third point that I'd like to make is that the Landmark Preservation Board should endeavor to identify cultural resources that are potentially eligible for local landmark designation and potentially nominate that resource to the Bothell Register of Historic Landmarks with the owner's permission as required. And so, this is actually baked into the Bothell Municipal Code as one of the kind of principles of the Landmark Preservation Board. And so, with those 3 points, address what's on the slide here, hidden history, but also working on survey efforts. And so that leads to the fourth point, which is the Historic Preservation Program of the City of Bothell will endeavor to complete periodic surveys of cultural resources as time and funding, and particularly grant funding, which is where the majority of these survey efforts have been funded by, as much as that funding permits. And so those are kind of the first overarching principles. And so they generally deal with cultural resource identification, documentation, and where possible and where appropriate, designation. And keep in mind that some property owners may be more interested in being listed in the National Register of Historic Places. Some property owners may be interested in the Bothell Register of Historic Landmarks. And so, there are certainly a variety of designations that are available. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we have encountered recently, and we are working with the Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation when we come across these instances of this, is there are some previously identified and surveyed cultural resources in Bothell that are not properly mapped on the state database, which some of you in the know may know Wizard, WISAARD. That's the platform that's a GIS-based platform that DAP uses to map cultural resources. And so, anytime we've got a proposed permit that comes in, that's one of the first places that we go to because, the Bothell inventory of cultural resources is officially housed on Wizard. And so one of the things, yes, go ahead.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I came on the board in 92 and a large book had already been done, but that was all done literally, that was the paper resource. And it was in at least a 3 or 4 inch binder.
Right.
Now, that was then taken in the mid 90s was taken to the next level at the state. That's pre-Wizard.
Uh-huh.
And then I think Wizard came in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Right.
And that's probably when we didn't have a budget to make all of the transition. And I bet that's where it might have got lost.
It's actually not a matter of the information being lost. The information is there. It's just mismapped. And every resource in Bothell that's been surveyed and has what's known as a historic property inventory form, all of that is on Wizard. The challenge that we've had is that sometimes the data points were not plotted correctly in GIS, and they are in the vicinity of the cultural resource and not necessarily where it needs to be. And so it's caused a little bit of issue recently.
Oh, I can imagine dealing with some of those as an architect. Yes, I get that.
Yeah.
There's also, I do remember we had some issues with this in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
There were some issues. There was also, there's been the board has kept, and I don't know where it is, that's somewhere in our staff database, has kept an ongoing list of inventory that of properties or sites that would be eligible for any of the three designations. And of those on that list, the homeowners or property owners have been notified. So if we could find that, very few of those properties have been lost. A number of them have changed hands, but they changed hands and they still didn't want to be approached.
Okay.
But they have been approached. Very politely, too.
That's good.
Sometimes numerous times.
Politeness is of course key.
Yes. I just
and,
wanted to bring that up, though, because I know that those are available somewhere.
Okay,
Yeah,
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You can contact me.
And that, that kind of leads into the next point, which is, reviewing the status of the current review the status of the cultural resources that are already on the Bothell Register of Historic Landmarks, to verify their current status, their location, and to update their documentation on Wizard. And, part of this is because, there have been, there are, definitely some of the landmarks that are not in their original location. That's not a secret, right? But it's just, kind of tracking, kind of better tracking that, right? So finally, one of the things that I would like to mention to the board this evening is trying to identify potential alternatives to local, state, and national historic designation, which may either be, number one, stronger tools for the long-term preservation of certain cultural resources, or alternately, a way of recognizing cultural resources in the community that may not qualify for our traditional designation programs. And so there's a couple of things going on here, right? So as some of you may know, it's like King County, their landmarking process actually has two levels of designation. And it's like there's a and forgive me, I'm drawing this right off the top of my head. And so they have a lower level of designation that does not have any regulatory teeth, that recognizes the significance, the cultural significance and historic significance of a particular cultural resource, that in some cases is, for properties, cultural resources and properties that may not possess sufficient integrity to be designated at the local, state, or national level. And the other thing at play too is that I've heard that the Washington Trust for Historic Preservation might in the future be adding the possibility of those who are very interested in the long-term, almost perpetual preservation of their cultural resource, their particular cultural resource, can have a preservation easement placed on their property that is then held and controlled by the Washington Trust for Historic Preservation, but with the caveat that there's there's some financial transactions that go on there. And so that is in the very, very early stages of being developed. And so, I would anticipate there's going to be more news about that within the next couple of years. And I will certainly, as soon as I find out more about it, this only just recently came to my attention. So those are the general overarching best practices to look at. And so our recommended action, so the staff, what we're asking is we're asking the Landmark Preservation Board to indicate what are the key priorities when it comes to the topic of cultural resources that staff should consider while we revise the existing historic preservation element. And so you absolutely don't have to answer right now. We're going to totally going to discuss it right now, but don't feel pressured by any extent to answer now. You can communicate things as you have a chance to kind of think this through. These bullet points are contained in tonight's agenda packet, which is posted online at the City of Bothell website, and so you can refer to that. So with that, that concludes my presentation, and I think now is a chance to discuss.
Thank you for the presentation, Adam. And does anyone have any questions or comments? I'll give it a couple more seconds. It's
Like
okay.
Adam mentioned, I'll have my contact info. I can give you Adam's as well.
Yeah.
So you can always email us or available on my phone number. I think I have my. I have my contact info up there. And then if you want to message Adam directly, I can give you his as well. I'll leave that up there.
I would just say I really like the idea of this cultural resources element,
Mhm.
kind of shift from the landmarks preservation focus. I'm not sure I don't understand exactly what it means. I mean, I think it's a phrase that has a lot of interpreted a lot of ways, as I've indicated earlier. But I think it opens up the door for us to look at historical preservation of things like, I was at the fire station recently for an open house, and I got to talking to the folks there, the chief, and I said, on the landmarks preservation, do you know of any folks that are kind of into the history of the fire department, fire brigades, whatever, how these evolved, even down to the question of why does Bothell have a fire department as opposed to a fire district serving those things? There's a whole lot of political discussion that goes on at city council meetings years ago about how to do that and why to do it that way. And the same is true of our policing department, as well as our codes evolution. Do we have historically black codes or native codes that acted those minorities in the area that people should be aware of historically?
Yeah, no, we've been involved in the project at UW that's looking at restrictive covenants. Nothing has popped up in Bothell yet, but I'm almost positive that doesn't mean that we're somehow alone in not
It
doing
may
that.
not have been explicit.
Yeah, and I think that right now they're only looking at the explicit language in the covenants, because I did ask that question. Is there implicit language in the covenants that you are trying to identify? Right now, it's just explicit, but it is an ongoing project, so they're continuing to review them for all the counties. So check back in every now and then and see what's going on. But
So board member Salazar, I see has a question, his hand's up.
Yeah, Adam, great presentation. I think it's a lot to consume, and I'm trying to digest everything so I can have some sort of input. And I just want to make sure that I am clear on potentially some of the ideas that these board members can potentially bring. So are you potentially asking for, maybe different like culinary exploration series, or like a culture exchange program, or like a culture storytelling, some sort of like storyline, or a podcast? I'm just trying to think of what kind of our current generation could relate to. Educational culture workshops. I just want to make sure, am I thinking on the right pathway, or are we looking for something else?
Oh, that's a very good question. And so the main intent of this component, this cultural resources element, is to really help shape how Bothell identifies cultural resources and how we either conserve or potentially designate those cultural resources. And so, but I like the idea. I mean, education, like the things that you're describing, are part and parcel of the greater effort, right? And so, because we already talked about, I believe it was board member Stompy mentioned, that signage, people not knowing, that house X right down the street is listed on the Bothell Register of Historic Landmarks. And so I think that definitely educating the public, and also sharing more about, I mean, particularly the hidden stories, like the hidden history, like, how I presented it is certainly a very ripe topic for, video, YouTube videos, podcasts, and things like that. So I don't think that you're quote unquote heading in the wrong direction. I think that that's a component of it. You need to bring those ideas to our attention, but also just remember that this is about the administration of the cultural resource management program in the city of Bothell. Does that make sense?
It does. Thanks for the clarification.
Okay. Absolutely.
Excellent. Are there any more questions or comments? Seeing none. At the moment, yeah, good, there you go.
Yeah, just want to make sure there's anything else folks wanted to talk about tonight that we can leave the space for that. Otherwise, obviously, of course, you can always field more questions later.
The other thing, just kind of food for thought. I wanted to loop back on one thing that board member Stompy mentioned. She was mentioning the egg industry and the fur industry, and so I did want to let you know that part of Bothell's hidden history as it relates to the Black cultural experience in Bothell is there is a noted Black female singer and ingenue who has a feature on historylink.org, was actually married to, very briefly married, it was a unfortunate marriage, unfortunately, was married to a Black mink farmer down, we're trying to identify where exactly the mink farmer's farm was currently. So it's interesting that there's the intersection of the fur industry and, of course, the Black cultural experience as well. But just kind of a little something that we're looking at right now, and hope to have some more information on soon.
Adam, there were 2 or 3 mink farms that I know of. I mean, we moved home in the 90s. At least we were out of the area for 10 years and moved back. My family's basically from home in Puyallup. My great grandfather was involved in the fox fur industry down there. So that's how I knew it. And his son-in-law was one of the leading poultry producers of pullets. So if your family was here in the early teens and 20s, then they were probably involved in some of these industries, or the berry industry,
Mhm.
things like that. But in Bothell, the Winningham farm that's on our national register was a mink farm. And the Crystal Springs Park, the family that sold the land to the city, donated some. I mean, there was the when the park was created, that was a mink farm. So we should be able to go back through maybe, unfortunately, those were not, that's the Snohomish County side of Bothell, so that's South Snohomish County. If there's any kind of info, I'm thinking city directories, county directories that we could find on that. We could find out where some of those farms were. And we could probably ask some of the ladies over at the Bothell Museum
Mhm.
if they've got the records. Because I mean, there are different maps that point out these farms.
Right. And yeah, we're
20 or 30 years.
well. I would I can find one for you and show it to you because the King County Road Services Map Vault, which is online, which you're able to search by township, by section township range, right? By the aliquot, it's an amazing source of detail because on many of the maps, not only do they indicate property lines and right of way and just all of these things, but also the footprints of buildings and also what the farm was like. Was it a chicken farm? Was it a mink farm? And things like that. The other thing that I've had a lot of luck with, and this is something that I've used researching Bothell properties, are searching the Washington Department of Ecology's water rights records. And I've found a wealth of information because they list, like, what are you using this impoundment of water for? And it's like, oh, I'm growing berries, or I have a fish farm, or they list out. And I've also used that in Oregon as well, because my company does Oregon projects as well. And so that there are all sorts of interesting sources of information that it takes a little bit of digging, but I'm definitely, particularly in Snohomish County, you kind of have to find all the stones in order to turn them over and find the information.
So in the past, we've had projects, we've tended to do them long-term, so a project can take anywhere from 2 years to 5 years. The book took 12.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
But, well, you have to get grants, and
Yeah.
you never get enough grant to do much more than a step. I think, coming up with some of those, identifying some of the properties, and then identifying a way of tagging those properties with signs or marks. That we had talked at one time about using QR codes. So that people who are walking, or we can attach it to our trail system or our bike trails, so that, there's a little thing that comes up, a little like flag and a little sign, and there's a QR code or something, so we can involve people literally in, as they go by properties on the trails and the bike trails to find out information.
I like the QR code idea because that's something I would do. Just person walking by, I would go, okay,
Yeah.
I'll scan it and see what happens. And
Because it can all tag back to the Bothell City website where we have the information and can update it.
I like too that kind of also aligns with what you were saying earlier about the systems of the rivers and how everything connects with the trails, because there's trails along both the river, both the North Creek River and.
Exactly. You know,
Mhm.
this needs to be multifaceted. It needs the landmark designation, if we're just tagging it to buildings and properties, is so limiting because it doesn't encompass the whole story. And it leaves out the changes. And, you know,
Yeah.
we live in a very changing environment.
for sure.
Besides, I'm an information geek. And I like to know this stuff.
I think it's a good suggestion.
It also, and it hasn't been mentioned, but the charge of the Landmark Preservation Board, at least at the state level, is is a very strong education component for the community. And I think that this helps the Landmark Board meet its goals, and contributions to the city. And that, you know, goes beyond trying to get information in schools or trying to get information into something that's physical, but disseminates it more uniformly. Then we just have to figure out where to get money to support something.
Okay.
Developers. No, I mean,
Yeah,
we've been limited to the signage
Yeah.
because that's tangible and we can get them to physically do something. So maybe Adam will call on your group to be creative for how we can develop resources for tagging things. But my husband and I were just back at Acadia National Park, and in the QR codes and the ability back there to tap into information as you went to different sites is really helpful. I'm always looking for things like that. Stuff. We gotta do it. How do we get it out there? How do we give credit to people who came before and the environment and roll them all into one?
Thank you. Right.
Excellent. So, any more discussion? Seeing none, that was a good discussion though. Okay, so we would, should we do the minutes very last, or do you want to put minutes like here and then go to reports from staff?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do them now.
Okay. Approval of minutes. So the way I do this right is we read the minutes and then I ask for a motion.
You don't even have to read them
No.
because they were provided in the packet. We
Yeah.
can just say I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. I did read them.
Member Sampe makes the motion. Member Thomas seconds.
Perfect. And then you'll ask if everyone
Does-
do a vote. Yep.
Okay, well, I'm going to get the votes here. So, Board Member Sampe.
Aye.
Okay, yeah, sure, aye. Board Member Thomas. Board Member Salazar.
Aye.
Board Member Babazanov.
Aye.
And myself, aye. Approved. Let's go.
Brilliant.
If I may, actually, board member Babazanoff needs to recuse because he was not at that meeting.
Oh. Okay,
Good catch.
All right. What do I need to say at this point?
I refuse.
Oh, okay, I did say I recuse.
I refuse.
Okay, cool. Thank you, though. Okay, well, now let's go on to reports from staff.
Staff.
Oh, we had some reports here. I'm teasing you, I'm teasing you.
Beyond that,
Okay, reports from members. My only report is to encourage everyone to vote. Elections are coming up, so no matter how you vote, just vote. Good to get your voice in. Okay, so no more reports from members, so,
I have a question. I don't know if that's.
Oh. sure.
Is the chapter 22.12 still the Bothell Code, the Landmark Preservation Board, whose creation and that's still current?
yeah, so the Bothell Municipal Code is what it is currently. And part of what will come out of this is we'll get a technical memo for all of the comp plan. And then starting in the next year, after the comp plan is adopted, we'll get into code revisions.
Okay. Well, seeing
So
as there's no,
that would be, is that 20, would that be 2025 approximately?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know, I can't remember when we have to have it done by, and I'm sure there's an option for us to kind of get that going before the end of adoption, but certainly once
Okay.
it's adopted, is when we'll really be starting work on that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we'll certainly want to have, we'll want to have, when we get to that point, we'll want to have, briefings, work sessions, time for feedback and discussion. Because that's a big component of the comp plan is updating ordinances, revising ordinances, because that's where the rubber meets the road, as it were. Because that guides the whole process at the day-to-day level. So, look ahead to 2025.
Is it possible for the board to recommend to the council in terms of, because the code's all well and good, but there's no funding provided. And that's been a major concern over the last 4 or 5 years that I've been involved with the Landmarks Preservation Board, is that, we don't have anything in terms of a state-wise or city-wise in terms of, 10 cents per 100,000 or a penny per 1,000 or something that would fund, landmarks preservation, historical preservation, and meet some of the requirements that are, or I don't know, maybe they're just suggestions in the code. So often that, but I mean, there's a lot of language in here that isn't being really fulfilled at all. And it's not being fulfilled because there isn't any funding for it. You can't either hire enough consultants or enough people to do the work that.
Mr. Nelson, I actually do have something I could report. I
Yes.
realize, provide a status report on the McAdoo property.
excellent.
If you recall, last month, the commission voted to approve the nomination of the McAdoo property to the local register of historic places. And since that time, the property has actually changed hands. And since we need consent of the property owner to proceed and have the city council formally take action, we're working with the current property owners to secure their consent. I feel confidence that we'll get that, but we still have to do that process. And I'm hoping by the time, next time this board meets, we'll have good news to report on that, but it is still
No
proceeding.
problem.
But almost immediately after that meeting occurred, there was a change in property ownership. And so we've had to do a little bit of We've had to work pretty quickly. And Anna's been so helpful, and I think we're going to be getting some correspondence out by the end of this week, if not tomorrow, on this matter. Adam, I don't know if you have anything else to share on that, but I just wanted to provide a quick update.
No, I appreciate you. Thank you for the reminder. I had gotten lost in cultural resources element land and had forgotten to mention that. But yeah, that's the process. Next up in the process is to make sure that we have owner's consent, and then it'll go to city council for the initiation of the designation negotiation. Because there's controls and incentives and things like that. So more to come.
Is there a meeting that do you think that would happen, like a specific date? It doesn't have to be. If there's not, that's okay too. But is there a specific city council meeting that would happen on?
I mean, I would love to be able to say that we could secure the consent of the current property owners and have that action taken along with the management agreement form by the end of this year.
Okay.
So we'll shoot for that.
That's
But
fair.
as long as we get the consent of the current property owners, I think we'll feel a lot more comfortable
Yeah.
if that
Yeah.
extends a little bit.
Yeah.
If I remember, I think they came to the meeting, the people who were going to buy the property, and they sounded okay with it, if I remember right. But maybe not. Maybe I'm not remembering that right. But
Still have their signature.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
Don't assume. I get
Don't
you.
assume.
But thank you for the update, though. Okay, was that? That
was
sounds good.
really an important thing to get.
Yeah, no, I thought it went well. Okay, well, seeing as there's no further business, is there a motion to adjourn? Board Member Sampe makes the motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Board Member Thomas, seconds. So now we'll go to a vote. Board Member Sampe?
Aye.
Board Member Thomas?
Aye.
Board Member Salazar?
Right.
And I think that just myself, aye. Oh, no, excuse me, Board Member, you weren't on there for a second. Board Member Babajinov.
Sorry, I just keep on getting disconnected. Yeah.
Oh,
What's
no
the question? I
problem.
missed the question.
No big deal. We're just making the motion to adjourn. So aye if you accept that motion, and nay if you do not.
Aye.
Excellent.
Aye.
Thank you. And myself, aye. So we are now adjourned at 7:17 PM. And do we have a date for our next meeting? I know that would probably be late November, so that's kind of Thanksgiving time.
We did talk about doing our next meeting in December.
I see.
I think
Yes.
stay tuned for email correspondence on that to see if what dates proposed and et cetera.
Okay.
Yeah.
But thanks for the
That sounds
reminder
good.
to get that on the schedule.
Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for being here and for participating, and thank you all for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay.
So you're gonna be here when we go
Cheers.
through all the ordinances?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I've done that presentation. It's helpful. I've done that presentation a bunch of times now. So it's
No,
just
I
kind of
mean, the
rote.
nitty gritty
Oh,
when
the
we're
code.
sitting
Oh, yeah.
there and start doing the
I have to
language
say,
and
I'm
stuff.
kind of a code nerd, having started in current planning here, so I'm actually looking forward to the code part.
But geez.
Weirdly, and so is Deputy Director Winchell. She's big on the code stuff, so yeah, she'll be back with that. We're excited
Just,
for that.
just to share with Adam, the landmark, the Title 22 was written by a committee of 4 of us. By combining, if I recall correctly, I remember Spokane. We used their code. We used Oregon City. And we used 2 other ones, one from back east and one from somewhere else local. And we just started writing and then turned it over to the city and let them go from there. That was
Interesting.
Well, you got to start somewhere.
You got to start somewhere. That's exactly right. Oh, Sarah, you're still recording.
No, yeah. Thanks.
Yep.
Uh,
That one's yours.